I guess that was my smoke signal. Welcome. We're excited you're here. This is the opening day of our three-part series on housing in Arizona for Lambda Alpha International. If you're not familiar with Lambda Alpha International, it is a land economics group. We have a chapter in Phoenix, but it's an international organization. And we're focused on things related to land use and land economics development. So if you're interested at all and interested in membership, we'd love to chat with you about it. We hold programs and we have various events to improve networking. It's a really solid organization. So if you haven't joined or if you're interested, please reach out to one of us. I would like to real quickly.
You're muted, Scott. Scott, you're muted. We lost Scott.
Perhaps, Scott, do you not know you're muted?
Did I just say all of that?
Yes, yes.
That's awesome. Well, it's funny because I got a phone call right when I was starting, and I think what it automatically did was mute my line. So
Okay.
Anyway, should I start again?
Why don't you start again, and please introduce Loretta, and then we'll start the program.
Welcome to our housing series for Lambda Alpha International. LAI is a great organization focused on land economics. We'd love it if you're interested in joining. We'd love for you to talk to us about it. Without further ado, I'd like to first introduce our title sponsor, our series sponsor, Loretta Flick. Would you like to say a word or two about your company?
You're muted.
Sorry about that. Good afternoon or good morning. This is a series that I really look forward to sponsoring. Cardinal is a global engineering environmental firm, and in Phoenix, we do a lot of work with the private and public side, but especially the home builders. We're really invested in working with all the home builders here. So this series on housing was just perfectly fit for us, and I look forward to being able to sponsor it and be involved in the next three meetings. So thank you very much.
Loretta, thank you very much for sponsoring. I really appreciate your support on this. So I'm going to give a brief introduction on the housing series, and then I'd like to turn it over to Sheila Harris, who's moderating today's group. Really what this came from was, obviously everybody knows we're in an interesting state of the housing market in Arizona. And I've heard lots of people tell us that it's a bubble. It's not a bubble. We are in a structural imbalance in supply demand. We've got workforce housing supply needs. We have affordability needs. We just have an issue. We don't have enough housing. So what we wanted to focus on was the workforce housing piece, one, and that's what we're talking about today. We wanted to talk about the cost of regulation and how that has impacted housing and some of the things we might do to reduce some of that cost. With our second one, and then the third one, we want to talk about some of the challenges and opportunities we see going forward with some density specifically, not dealing specifically with affordability, but the need of improving densities and increasing densities across the valley. So today we are focused on the workforce component. We have a great group of folks here, and Sheila Harris with Sheila Harris Consulting. I won't say, Sheila, that you've been in the business a long time, but Sheila's been doing this for a while, and so she's our resident expert on all things related to quality workforce affordability, housing at every level. So I'm going to turn it over to Sheila. Sheila, take it away.
Thank you, Scott, and welcome everybody to our program today. I am someone who has been involved in this for a couple of centuries, it seems like some days, but really probably only more like 30 or 35 years. Today, we've got a great panel of speakers. We'll start off with Tom Simplot, who is the current director of the Arizona Department of Housing. And that'll be followed by Titus Mathew, who is relatively new also in his role as housing director, but at the city of Phoenix. And then we'll hear from Owen Metz. He's with Dominium, and they are a private sector developer that specializes in building affordable housing. And he might even share about a great groundbreaking he had yesterday here in Phoenix. So that's the teaser to make sure you all stay on for the program. Just a brief bio for Tom. For those of you who don't know him, he is currently the director of the Arizona Department of Housing, but he has worked in government at all levels, from the elected, state, local, and federal levels. Most recently, prior to coming to ADOH, he was the deputy chairman of the National Endowment for the Arts in Washington, D.C. And besides being on the city council in the city of Phoenix for several years, he was also the CEO and president of the Arizona Multi-Housing Association. So with no further ado, Tom Simplot, we're going to turn this program over to you. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Sheila. And what I know I have learned from Sheila, I will just tell you. Sheila and I go back a long way. I am so thrilled to be here to talk about affordable housing, the need for affordable housing in Arizona. Perhaps in the course of this conversation, we're going to talk about maybe some missteps that the state collectively took over the past 10 years or so, how we can rectify some of that. And so, Scott, I really liked your introduction of the panel, talking about reducing regulation and looking at the costs involved. We know we're running out of developable land in the areas where we need it. And so if you're not familiar with the Department of Housing, I'll just give you a 60-second or less primer. We are the conduit for low-income housing tax credits in the state of Arizona. We also allocate other funds through various either HUD or Treasury programs. We this year have welcomed a new state low-income housing tax credit program. We're very excited about that. We are currently going through the public hearing process to formulate our new QAP for the year. That will cover both our federal LIHTC program as well as our state LIHTC program. We just shut off our first round of comments last night. We're now looking at those comments, reviewing those. Honestly, great comments, but I will tell you that we have gone from almost 300 pages for a QAP application down to 36 pages. And that took a lot of work. And so I applaud the work of not only our staff internally, but also of the consultant that we hired, Novogradic. They've done a great job. And by the way, that happened because we were listening to you. We were listening to the community, the developers, both for-profit and nonprofit, the lenders, the institutions. We were listening to the development community on how we can create a better QAP. We know that Arizona has fallen behind in competing with other states when it comes to the 4%, especially the 4% LIHTC monies. And we want to position ourselves to be one of the very best in the country, I hate to say easiest, but the most accessible low-income housing tax credit, especially 4% in the country. With regard to the 9%, I think today primarily we're talking about workforce, so I'll stay with the 4%, but 9% we're also laser focused on that, and again opening up that pipeline of new housing throughout the state. I was mentioning to one of my colleagues right before we started that I was talking to a mayor from one of our local cities just this morning, and he lamented and he said, "We don't have any housing. We don't have any housing in the entire city. 1 or 2 homes go on the market every day for sale. We have no affordable housing. There's nowhere for the college students to live. There's nowhere for anybody to live." And I always think of it as the Vail or Telluride problem, right? They got so caught up in making it so exclusive and so fabulous that they forgot that real people need a place to live year round. And we have to stay focused on our workforce. We have to stay focused on the ability to actually house people. And I'll close with this. I always talk about the spectrum of housing needs. Our department We are engaged throughout the entire spectrum. So whether it is the unhoused or the homeless community, bridge housing, permanent supportive housing, rehabilitative housing, extremely low income housing to workforce housing, we are engaged. If not directly, we will be engaged and are engaged now to be a conduit and a connector of resources between the development community, our cities, our towns, the state, and of course, those who need it the most, those who are going to live in all of this new housing. So with that, I will end my remarks, and then I sure hope there are comments and we'll have more of a free flow conversation. Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you, Tom. I did fail to mention in the introduction to please put your questions in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat, and we'll let each of our speakers have their introductory remarks, and then we'll open it up, and I think we'll go with comments from there. So thanks again, Tom. I really appreciate it. And sorry if I've left anything out of your education about housing. I'll work on that. I would next like to introduce Titus Mathew. Titus recently was appointed the housing director for the city of Phoenix. And the person that was prior in that position now works for Tom. So we all kind of stay in this business. We just have different roles at different points in our life. But Titus has been with the city for over 20 years. So even though he's new to being director, he has been working in the housing department. And he has also worked in other departments within the city and has a great finance background. And the services that are provided by the housing department also include providing housing for people who are experiencing homelessness, disabled veterans, those that are human trafficking survivors, as well as people that just have not enough money to afford a market rate apartment in our community these days. So Titus also is instrumental in working on the plan the city of Phoenix has for creating 50,000 new housing units in the next 10 years. And he may share a little bit of his work about that today. So with no further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Titus Mathew. Titus?
Thank you, Sheila. Appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. So to echo what Sheila and Tom said, I think the Phoenix metro area has a housing problem, and it's a significant problem that is not going to go away anytime soon. So one of the things that the Phoenix City Council last year did was approve the Housing Phoenix plan. Now, this plan is a very ambitious plan, and the plan is to create or preserve 50,000 homes by 2030. And how do we get there? So first of all, I got to recruit some positions to help me with that task. So that's my immediate problem, is recruiting staff to help me navigate this mission. So in the study we did, so there was a big comprehensive plan that was put together, and this plan brought out 9 initiatives in terms of how we can create or preserve 50,000 homes. So as part of the study, I want to share some of the things from the Housing Phoenix plan. So if you will, I'm not going to try to be rude, but if I look down, it's because I'm looking at my notes, because I have not memorized the entire plan, but I just want to talk about a few highlights that I want to present today. So a major component of the plan was a gap analysis that was done that revealed that in Phoenix, the city of Phoenix, we have a need for over 163,000 homes, and broken down by 9,000 units for seniors, 5,000 for veterans, 9,000 for persons with disabilities, and over 2,400 for people experiencing homelessness. So that is a story we told council in terms of what the need is in Phoenix. And as the fastest growing city for the 5th year in a row, Phoenix population continues to increase, but our market rate, or the housing market, has not kept up. And I'm sure Owen will talk about that in his presentation. And this shortage is due to underproduction of housing over the past several decades. The costs are rising faster than income. So one of the things we've noticed in Phoenix is between 2010 and 2018, the Phoenix median income increased by 10%, while median rent increased by over 28%, and the median home price increased by over 57%, which is significant. And an example like we are facing today in Phoenix is, even with our workforce in our city of Phoenix, employees or our firefighters, teachers, or the police force, is an average rent for a 2-bedroom unit is $1,300, which is just affordable for a single parent household earning 80% of the area median income. According to Zillow, the current median home price in Phoenix is $360,000. The only income level that can afford to purchase a medium price home are families that make over 120% of AMI or area median income, which is $94,000 for a family of 4. I remember many, many years ago, over 20 years ago, when I bought my first home in Arizona, the price of the home was $115,000. So it's gone a long way since then. And as I mentioned, the council is unanimous in thinking that they want this Housing Phoenix plan to succeed. So one of the policy initiatives that we are considering in Phoenix, or we are doing in Phoenix, is to prioritize new housing in areas of opportunity. So this is like finding scoring criteria for planning, the planning department in zoning. And when applications come forward, like giving points for areas like close to major transit corridors, quality education, employment opportunities, healthcare, and to those kind of objectives. So those are the kind of areas we're doing to figure out if the planning department can score those projects at a higher level. In addition to that, our planning department is doing a GIS mapping of the entire Phoenix. And I think they're almost complete. And I think they will be releasing it next month during the National Planning Month for the planning department. I think that's when they want to showcase what they've done so far. The second initiative, which is a difficult initiative, but is to amend current zoning ordinances to facilitate more housing options. And I think this is an area that Tom and the rest of the state will have to figure out, the legislature will have to figure out some too, as to how to do this. In order to accommodate more units in Phoenix, we have to amend existing zoning ordinances to incentivize more affordable housing and workforce housing and uses like accessory dwelling units like LA has done. So that's something that we are looking at piloting in Phoenix in certain areas to provide, and also to provide incentives to developers if they build affordable housing or possibly pay into an affordable housing trust fund. And that would also help because as state law prevents us from doing inclusionary zoning or asking for trust funds in Phoenix, I think that's a conversation we'll have to have with the state and our council members to see what the community wants and how we can move that forward. Another initiative we're considering that doing in the city is redeveloping city-owned land into mixed income housing. The city has identified over 140 parcels of land for creating mixed income housing. And these parcels will be released through an RFP process or request for proposals over the next 5 years, and engaging the private sector and the community to provide responses to help us build these units that are needed in Phoenix. The final initiative that I want to talk about is expanding efforts to preserve existing housing stock. That's another area of concern for me in Phoenix is a lot of the units are getting old and need rehab, and then some of the owners lack the funding to fix it up or keep it affordable or continue to keep it affordable. So what we're looking at is CDBG funds through the federal government are offering rehab dollars. And so far we received 4 applications for rehab projects in Phoenix. Another part of it is also to acquire properties the city to own for future development in the city for affordable housing. And another project we're also looking at is a community land trust model. So currently we're working with Newtown on a pilot project for 5 homes to do a community land trust. And we would like to expand that model. In fact, I sat on a webinar yesterday trying to understand more about it and figure out what is the solution for people in Phoenix to own a home or live in a home. And finally, we're using CARES funds provided by the federal government to incentivize Section 8 landlords to continue housing Section 8 clients through vouchers. And last week, the council approved an additional $1 million to continue the program to the American Rescue Plan Act. So that's going to help us with continuing, and we have had some success with that. We have got over 137 landlords, new landlords to the program that we have never achieved in the last 10 years. And I'm sure Tom, in his former role in the Arizona Multifamily Housing Association, will appreciate that. But we're trying to work with that group as well to provide more incentives and continue incentives to provide housing for our clients. So that, in a nutshell, is a very concise Housing Phoenix plan, but there's more to it. But I would be happy to answer those questions, but if you have any. But that is the end of my presentation today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Titus. It's really exciting to hear about all of those possible developments and the movement and the interest by so many in developing housing that's affordable for our community. Today, it's really a pleasure for me to introduce Owen Metz from Dominium. And it was really thrilling yesterday to be at the groundbreaking for Vista Ridge, which is going to be a new development in Phoenix using those precious 4% credits that Tom Simplot talked about earlier in the presentation. And hear about other things that Dominium is doing. When I approached Owen and I was saying, well, there's this organization, it's called LAI, and I was trying to explain what it was. He goes, oh, I belong to it. I'm a member in Minnesota. I said, okay, well, he says, I don't know how to transfer that to Phoenix. I said, that's something I can do for you. So Owen, it is great to have a fellow LAI member here, and your membership has officially been transferred from Minneapolis to Phoenix. So welcome, and tell us all about the great work of Dominium. Thanks.
Sure. Thank you, Sheila. Appreciate the kind introduction. I'll have some PowerPoint slides I'll pull up, because I think it'll paint a little different picture on affordable housing than maybe others might have. But yeah, Sheila mentioned I recently moved here to Phoenix with my wife and 4 children. I've been here all of about 6 weeks. So at that groundbreaking that Sheila mentioned, I made the mistake of wearing a sport coat, trying to dress up for the groundbreaking in the Phoenix summer. So I've learned one lesson so far living here in the Valley, and are excited to learn a lot more. Let me try to share my screen here quick. All right, are folks seeing that? Perfect. So as Sheila mentioned, I'm with Dominium. We're an affordable housing owner, operator, and developer. And you can see one picture of what workforce housing can look like. This is one we built actually in St. Paul, Minnesota, but we've been doing this about 50 years and started doing Section 8 development back in the 70s, and have switched into Section 42 and kind of the capital A affordable housing business. One thing I'm excited about this conversation in particular is that this really is a math problem. You boil this down, it's a math problem, and we can solve math problems as an industry. But it will take leadership. It'll take everyone rowing in the same direction to try to figure that out. And just doing some quick math this morning, if you took 1 cup of coffee a week for every Arizonan and invested that in affordable housing, you get to $1 billion really quickly. And that's the number that it's going to take, but it's not a heavy lift. It sounds like a lot, but that's that type of investment that will help solve this problem, because the federal government's probably not going to give more resources to the state of Arizona. And so thinking through how we can do that as an industry, we work across the country in about half the states in the country. So I'll show this next slide just to show where we work. Arizona is pretty small on the map right now for us, but we have about 3,000 units in the pipeline. This doesn't add the 308 that we just celebrated the groundbreaking on in Phoenix for Vista Ridge Apartments. But it shows you where we're working, where we're growing is really where population growth is happening. And that's why we chose Phoenix as the new headquarters for our Mountain West region. You can see the light blue shaded states there, but basically New Mexico, Colorado, and West will be where we'll work for building and developing affordable housing in that region based out of our Phoenix office here. We have about 20 staff that are looking to build and develop housing. And as I mentioned, we're about a 3,000 unit pipeline that we're working on in the Valley. So we're really excited about kind of the opportunity and I'll say challenges of taking that on, and quite honestly, also just helping the industry as a whole. We're a very old, mature company at 50 years old, and we've been successful, so we can get back to the industry and to groups and try to bring ideas and best practices to the state. And as Tom mentioned, the Department of Housing has been very receptive to feedback and discussion, and we've already seen some of the regulations being lifted, and we think that'll help lead to being able to build more efficient, cost-wise affordable housing, and allow throughput to happen quicker, and really create efficiencies so that once you get through an entitlement process and you have a deal ready to finance, you can quickly get it closed, get it in the ground, and get it built. The two spots I wanted to cover today are sort of just a quick picture of what is today's workforce and affordable housing and what it's not. And then just talk again about some of those opportunities and challenges that at least I'm seeing coming into Phoenix as a relatively new member of the Phoenix community. So this is kind of what we sort of get some of the fear mongering that folks bring up. I think the one on the left was in St. Louis. I think that's been demolished. Cabrini Green is on the right in Chicago. But public housing failed for a lot of reasons. One of those was lack of profit motive, and lack of really private incentive to maintain. You could talk about density, you could talk about other things, but there's a lot of reason behind profit motive. And with the tax credit program, many don't know, it started under President Reagan and a Republican administration. And part of the reason was that it brought a public-private partnership to the table to own and develop and manage affordable and workforce housing. And it brought profit motive, and it brought long-term incentive to people to own and operate it and maintain it, more importantly, to be high quality housing for a long time. And so that's why there was such broad bipartisan support, and there still is broad bipartisan support for workforce and affordable housing. And this public-private partnership role is both, Tom and Titus mentioned, in that partnership with either cities or state agencies. We kind of mentioned on some of this earlier too, but I wanted to just show for the Phoenix Metro what those income limits are. Everyone wants affordable housing. We all want to be able to afford our mortgage. We all want to be able to have a house or apartment that we can afford. But affording rent is a lot different when you make $30,000 to $50,000 than it is when you make, say, $100,000. If you make $100,000, it's tight, but you can afford $2,000 for a mortgage or rent payment for a home. That's almost half your income, but you can still make ends meet there. But if you're a single mom working for $18 an hour full time, make $37,000, $38,000, it's very tough to find any housing, and certainly in the market rate sector. And same for seniors on fixed income. I think the average Social Security income is around $18,000. That's 36 for a couple annually. That's tough to afford rent. And you can see where the rent levels are for that 60% of median income limits that Tom mentioned that the 4% credit serves. So, relatively affordable, from $800 to about $1,200 a month. Not cheap, but a lot less than the $1,500 a month for a one bedroom that most apartments rent for in the Metro. So just wanted to show some of the numbers, because I think it really shows that this is the workforce housing. This is kind of current blue collar jobs. There's a lot of service sector jobs, a lot of hourly workers. There's not as much manufacturing and jobs like that. There's hopefully going to be more, but this is the people that already work in the community and just struggle to afford housing. So this is one we're finishing up. I just want to show a few quick images. This is a senior building we're building in Mesa. It's our first ground up deal in the Metro. Here's an aerial shot of about a month ago. 3-story senior product, high amenities. You can see the solar panels on the carports. We'll have a pool, a clubhouse, a fitness room, a theater. So this looks and feels like any high-end luxury apartment community. And that's one of the goals of this program. And our company is to have affordable housing blend in, have it look as nice or nicer than any of the market rate product that's out there. And when this is done and landscaped and we got some asphalt in and the pool filled up, it'll really paint even a better picture. This is the one that we just celebrated yesterday. So we're building our first family workforce ground up product here in Phoenix as well at 19th Avenue in Southern and South Phoenix. Again, high amenities, really high quality product. And this is very indicative of what other developers are building either in the Valley or across the country for affordable housing. It's very different than what you saw before. You need to get through zoning, you need to get through entitlements, you need to get people to support it. So you're really forced, which you do anyways, into building really high quality product. This is one we're working on in Goodyear. This is a senior building that we're working through the entitlement process on right now to rezone a site to allow for multifamily, right where the 303 ends right now. In Goodyear, this would be a 4-story senior elevator product. This would be the family product next door. So again, you can see the quality. And since we haven't had it built a lot in Phoenix yet, this is one in Texas we built, similar 3-story walk up. You can see the quality, pool, high amenities, clubhouse. This is one we built in Colorado, a little more urban design with bringing the building more close to the sidewalk. Play structures, pools again. So you really see the quality level that affordable housing can bring to communities. These are some interior shots of our clubhouse and amenities. And these are all bond 4% finance transactions that Tom mentioned. And working with local municipalities and state agencies to bring to the market. And then once you get inside the units, again, just as nice. You know, the difference maybe between us and market rate is we probably don't put tile backsplashes in, and maybe our light fixtures aren't quite as nice, but still really high quality product, all LED lights, all energy efficient appliances and water saving plumbing features, things like that. So before I sort of talk about some of the opportunities, I wanted to mention some of the challenges. You know, Phoenix is most people know on the call is a very large metro. It's the 11th largest in the country when you factor in the entire Maricopa and Pinal County metro. So it's the 11th largest metro in the county. But where the challenge starts is the density per square mile and the I'll say world's largest suburb, right? Like everything's just spread out. And I say that in a nice way because I love Phoenix and I'm here to stay, but there's a challenge that from a developer standpoint, when you have such little density to begin with, to try to bring some density in is a challenge. So even though it's the 11th largest metro in the country, it is the 106th largest by density. You can see some of the other cities rank from 1 to 25, Houston being at 25. So even the urban sprawl and lack of zoning in Houston has resulted in 600 units per square mile in population density, which is still 25th largest in the country. In Phoenix is less than half of that and falls way behind in the rankings of density. It puts us, I found this one interesting. Some obvious ones where you can see the high density of LA and New York, and San Francisco and Philadelphia. Then you get to Detroit and Chicago and areas that, you know, are dense, but not as high as the others. But Phoenix is just ahead of Muncie, Indiana, and Oshkosh, Wisconsin. I'm from Wisconsin originally, and I could tell you I don't find a lot of similarities between Phoenix and Oshkosh, but I can see the lack of density as one of those. And you can see where it falls in line with cities like Nashville and Louisville and San Antonio and others in Texas. And I think we'd probably generally say we're a much better urban community than some of those. But the lack of density is a challenge when you start looking at development. Phoenix itself is a little different story. You know, Phoenix is more in line with, but still behind Dallas and Denver if you look at the city as a whole. So you know you're definitely seeing more height and more density happening in Phoenix. And so I just wanted to show sort of where the 5th largest city lies relative to some of their peers. But even Denver, which I don't think anyone would say is overly dense, is still about 50% more density than Phoenix. And it's a little behind Dallas. So it still has some room to fit some more housing in, as Titus mentioned, and zoning is going to be a big part of that. This is one I also found very interesting. I got this chart from the Maricopa Association of Governments, and one that Sheila found from Elliott Pollock Company. But the areas that I think are most interesting is this is looking at existing land area in the metro, and it identifies, and this was looking through land uses from GIS, assessors, state trust websites, things like that, and comparing existing land area to future proposed land area when you start factoring in municipal development plans and future zoning maps and general plan amendments and plans that cities have, to really take what is vacant land now, and for the most part, put almost all of it towards single family. So you can see that the Maricopa Association of Governments is projecting almost 900,000 more acres of single family land, which, assuming 4 dwelling units per acre, is about 3.5 million more homes built on that vacant land. You can see where multifamily jumps from a whopping 35,000 acres to 52,000 acres, or 16,000 acres more of multifamily land. And when you factor that in, and assuming you could get to 20 dwelling units per acre across that, that only adds 333,000 more housing units of multifamily based on current land plans and projected future areas. There's a huge discrepancy between single family and multifamily. Multifamily uses less water, which as a metro growing in the future, we're going to need to do less of. But that's 50 times more land for single family than multifamily. And if you look at it on units, it's 10 times more units, or a 10 to 1 ratio of single family versus multifamily. So that is a daunting thing to overcome when council members and mayors are getting yelled at by folks that don't want those people to live near them. But this helps explain some of the, I'll almost say, modern day redlining of single family versus multifamily, and some of the challenges our industry is going to face in the future. But there's a lot of good news. This is a map of Phoenix, as you can see. And this is a map from HUD that shows areas in maroon and purple where there's 30% more federal resources available for work and for developing multifamily. Sorry, that's not me. We'll have to find who that is and mute them. But so these areas, you can see a huge swath of Phoenix is available, and 30% more federal resources can come in to build housing. You can see Chandler and Gilbert, Queen Creek, large, almost all of Scottsdale, I think, north part of town and Anthem, and in areas, and out in Goodyear and Buckeye. So there's a lot of opportunity to use those federal resources that the state gets. And as a state, Arizona gets almost 800 million of federal tax exempt bonds, which, for those who are geeks of tax credit housing, that's what gets the 4% credit that Tom mentioned. And that 800 million, if all used for multifamily, could build about 6,000 housing units at basically no cost to the state of Arizona every single year. Now, that doesn't quite get to 50,000 for Phoenix or 150,000 for the metro, but it puts a big dent in the housing needs and opportunities that our state has. So it's we look at that as exciting. Certainly there's a challenge of getting cities and electeds on board, but the reality is going to hit them in the face. Housing needs to get built, and eventually we hope that it'll turn from not in my backyard to yes in my backyard, and really look at the economic development and opportunities that housing diversity brings in a positive way to communities. Just flip through these real quick. This is the same map and same zoom for Atlanta. You can see a lot less areas and opportunity. This is Salt Lake City and the range there. And this is Minneapolis, where I just moved from. So a lot less areas that don't have that same opportunity to bring additional incentives into those states. But Phoenix has a huge opportunity to build a ton of housing and get a bunch of folks housed that sorely need it. So I'll stop my rant at this point and love to interact with my colleagues here on the call and folks that might have questions on what we just went over and some of the challenges that we have.
Well, thank you, Owen. You've really given us a lot of food for thought. And, since we have such a small group, I think we can open it up to people who want to ask questions. I just ask you don't talk over each other. But we will, I think, start out with Michael Klein. Michael and I had lunch yesterday, and it took a while to get through lunch because he wanted to know everything I knew about affordable housing. And well, that took an hour and a half, actually. But there is a lot of interest in a lot of sectors in our communities about how do we make it a community for everyone, and why can't everyone's housing be affordable instead of the prerogative, affordable housing, or rather pejorative. And I think that we are collectively kind of coming to that realization. And Owen, I really appreciate your slides, particularly showing the density, and there's a great opportunity there. I'm also glad that you have expertise in the 4% credit, because that is a resource we have underutilized in our state and can really help, not only provide housing for those of low income, but also workforce housing as well. So Michael, you had kind of a complicated question, and perhaps you might want to make it in a little, perhaps a couple of questions instead of just trying to have one question, but I'm going to open it up to Michael. Please ask your question, and Tom, Owen, and Titus, please respond. Michael?
Thank you, Sheila, and thank you again for all of the time yesterday, bringing me up to speed on Arizona and affordable housing. I originally hail from Los Angeles, and Los Angeles has acute affordable housing problems. And most of those are what I would call man-made. The challenge I see here is that we have everyone from the governor's office down through the local municipalities have business development offices recruiting and doing a lot of successful recruiting of bringing in jobs, and that's exciting. But at the same time, there's not a coordination with the planning and zoning departments to make sure that there's available zoning to build the housing that is needed to house all those workers. And so it's a supply and demand thing from my standpoint. I'm kind of a free markets guy, and wrote a specific plan for 2 square miles in the city of LA that went free market and kept house prices from going up beyond inflation. It's called Warner Center. And so I guess what I'm curious about here is what could be done to ensure that the cities that are recruiting heavily for all these jobs make available zoning so that the housing can be put in, whether it's through 4% programs or 9% programs or just free market programs. That's my question.
I'm happy to lead off on answering this. Thanks, Michael, for the question. So first off, I think we should just own the fact that we have taken housing for granted in Arizona for years and years and years and years. We had wide open space, and having worked for the Home Builders Association of Central Arizona, I was one of those advocating for more homes all the time, right? And even 25 years ago, our cities and towns were pushing back against small lot size. So nothing new when you think about it. It's the same issue we have throughout the country. Once everybody gets in, they don't want somebody else to get in, and they sure don't want somebody else to get in with something that they consider inferior to what they have. So we're dealing with that today. Titus, Phoenix is not the problem. The city of Phoenix is not the problem. Michael, we have a problem throughout the rest of the suburban cities, and it boils down to what Owen said or referred to. It is NIMBYism. It's nothing new at all. Having served on the Phoenix City Council, I can tell you, if 5 people complain from a neighborhood, that elected official thinks that is a tidal wave. That's just a tidal wave of protest. And to me, none of this is going to change until we, and I say this collectively and from a personal basis, until we are prepared to provide support for those who are willing to stand up for the zoning changes and site plan approval when it's not a problem. These elected officials need to hear from people in their own elected districts when it's not suddenly on the agenda. What we have done, Michael, uniformly is the market rate developer will hire a zoning attorney and a team who will go out and spend perhaps hundreds of thousands of dollars on convincing a neighborhood to be supportive. What we're not doing collectively is spending hundreds of thousands of dollars educating neighborhoods before there's a specific zoning case before the council. Now, I don't know what that looks like, quite frankly. Much more people much more smarter than I am, but we can't simply expect our elected officials to stand up and fight for increased density, increased zoning, apartments, and let alone workforce housing or extremely low income housing. We cannot expect them to stand up for all of this if the development community cannot galvanize the neighbors and the neighborhoods to stand up for it before it becomes an issue in their own backyard. That's my personal belief on all of this.
Yeah, my thought, Michael, and I agree with Tom's sentiments, is, I mean, at the end of the day, it boils down to zoning. And, you know, you're at best, what I've found, if you get someone who is, you know, we're working through this right now in some zoning cases in the West Valley, at best you can get people to say is, yeah, I know we need it. Can you just move it somewhere else? That's the best you can get most people to say, and that they're still going to show up and yell at the council, yell at the planning commission, tell them you can't, there's traffic problems, there's crime problems, it's, you name it. But as long as that elected official has to vote on it and you have to go through a rezoning, which almost all housing multifamily has to, because there's very, very, very little open multifamily land across the whole metro. As long as that vote is going to be done by a city council, you're going to have a challenge in getting it approved, in my opinion. And it's going to take huge change in either leadership at that local level to say, no, we need this, we need housing, or it's going to take, you know, what we were talking about before this call, and we open this up to the broader meeting, is some sort of state intervention that says you can't deny affordable housing, or you can't, you know, we were working on one in Surprise, 3% of the housing stock is rental housing. That's not a sustainable growing, you know, they've been supportive so far. We think we'll get through our rezone and get through our entitlement case and be able to build on land that's actually already zoned for multifamily, but it doesn't have a density set. So it's just a challenge. Everyone gets really mad and it's very fearful, and it's hard to quench that loud minority that's beating the drum really loud.
Owen, would you speak a little bit about how you incorporated some of the community concerns into the Vista Ridge development, how it was, you know, previously agricultural land, and how you've got more gardens in the development than you normally would, but wanting to be reflective of the neighborhood? Could you talk a little bit about that process too?
Yeah, I stepped into that particular site after that negotiation was done, but again, it was just a discussion. The great part was we had a council member in Vice Mayor Garcia that wanted to support it, but force the neighbors and force folks that were concerned about it to say, guys, how do we work together to get something that you can like? And one of that was creating a neighborhood garden that a local agricultural group nonprofit is going to help manage and run. And I don't know a lot of details about that because I didn't structure that, but yeah, it's just working through and having an open dialogue. But that was a group that was willing to have the dialogue, and not everyone is. But I think generally, I think most neighbors would find that most developers are willing to have some level of, hey, how do we work together? How do we make changes? What do you like? What do you not like? And have a very candid, open dialogue. And, you know, whether that's adjusting buildings and in rotating them 90 degrees, or working through lighting, of making sure that light doesn't spill into neighbors and that you don't have light pollution, things like that. There's a lot of ways you can massage a site, but still have it feasible to get that, to help get some of that support.
I was also wondering, and Titus, this may be more a question for you, but has there been, or what would be your ideas regarding how to get sort of the economic development department and the housing department, to talk collectively when they're recruiting for, these wonderful companies to come to our community? What's going to be the housing component? Because I don't see that discussion occurs. So what are your thoughts about how we might be able to broaden that? Because I think that's part of the challenge we're seeing here.
Great question, Sheila. And I actually echo what Tom and Owen have said. And part of the thing is we are working currently with our CED department and planning. In fact, we have meetings now. Since I've taken over, we're going to be having meetings on a regular basis to talk about projects in Phoenix that impact zoning, housing, and jobs. So the present council is very supportive in Phoenix, like as Owen mentioned with the vice mayor and a lot of the others on the council, for more affordable housing in Phoenix. So that's a big. In fact, I was very surprised when I met with each council member. They all talked about the lack of affordable housing. So one of the things that we are looking to do is an educational campaign. So I think we want to engage the private sector and the community and our council folks to do a campaign and a media campaign in terms of NIMBYism and not enough, all that's happening. And I think a lot of it is a lack of education and a lack of knowledge of what affordable housing means. In fact, Darlene Newsom, and I think Sheila, you were present, she said, maybe we should change the term affordable housing and call it something else. And talk about how we can capture the market, or in terms of the audience, and saying how not to make affordable housing a negative connotation. So I think that's part of the way we have to work with the community, because we have a problem. And in terms of density, Owen, when I first came here, yes, they used to sell lots at half-acre lots were the norm for single-family homes, and then we came down to quarter of an acre or 10,000 square feet. So we have a problem. So we have to figure out a solution. I think part of that is an educational campaign.
I agree with you on that. I've just even started talking about housing that's affordable as opposed to affordable housing, because everybody's housing, quite frankly, should be affordable. And if people don't understand, just say, well, do you remember 2008 when people's income didn't match what it said they made when they applied for their loan and everybody lost their house? Just something that I think there is a lot to be said about continuing that discussion about what do we call this, and something that doesn't immediately send up, the red flags and everybody immediately closes their ears and just goes into a fear mongering mode. Do we have any other questions? I'm not seeing any others in the chat. We are getting close to our 12:30 time period.
So Sheila, could I
yes.
ask a question? So I think it was Owen who brought it up. And it's the legislative response to cities that refuse to zone and approve workforce housing or any sort of affordable housing. And now we're seeing states across the country who are passing state laws that will circumvent the local elected officials so that they cannot stop the development of new housing. And the irony, by the way, of these cities and towns, especially on the coast, who on one hand refuse to approve new housing, and on the other hand want to impose rent control, when rent control isn't the issue. It's supply and demand, exactly what Owen has indicated. And if they can't be encouraged or incentivized to allow for more units, then I think if we look at what's happening in other states, it may be taken out of their hands, and there may be a response they're not going to like at all. So I don't know what my question was in there, other than, gee, I wonder what other states are doing.
Well, you've certainly given us food for thought, Tom, which is what actually LAI is about. Titus, Owen, anyone, either of you want to respond to Tom's somewhat question?
Yeah, I know Massachusetts has had a program for a long time that I'll slaughter this a little bit, but there's a state board. If a project gets denied at a local level, you can appeal to a state board and for a zoning approval, and about 90% of those or more ultimately get approved at a state level. But since this law is passed, it's really forced cities in a positive way to work with developers to actually come to a local conclusion first and work at a local level to get it approved. So it doesn't have to go to the state to sort of get quasi rubber stamped and not have it be what the community is trying to work for and negotiate for. So it brings them to the table with a much different motivation and a positive outlook, saying, how can we work together to make this better, versus we just don't want to do it, and that knowing that the state could come in behind. So I think those are the types of things that are big ideas, and I'm sure very controversial for local electeds, but it would give them political cover too. So there's something that it could be a win-win, even as far-fetched as that sounds.
Titus, do you have any closing words?
No, I think I'd like to make sure that if you have any questions, please reach out. And then it's always about a partnership and engagement with the community. I think that helps with creating more housing. So it's not just a Phoenix Housing Department issue. It's like we have to be all connected and work in partnership to be successful. So thank you.
Right. The next part in this series will be October 21st, followed by one on November 18th. I'm going to turn it over to Scott now to close us out. Thank you, speakers. Thank you all for your questions as well. This has been a great discussion.
Thank you, Sheila. It was a fantastic discussion. I really want to thank Titus, Owen, and Tom. I really appreciate your expertise. Appreciate your engagement in this issue. This is an issue that we just discussed at GPEC this morning. Housing is an economic development imperative. It's a quality of life imperative, and Arizona has an opportunity to get it right. And so the engagement of folks like this is so critical and so important to the macro of figuring out how to do housing right. So our next session we're working on is related to the cost of regulation. We're hoping to have that panel specified in the next week. I want to again say a special thank you to Loretta Flick and Cardno for the sponsorship, and Sheila, thank you so much for your questions and running the panel. Really appreciate your expertise on this as well. And Sheila Hamilton behind the scenes, as always, she does a great job. So again, LAI is a great organization. We'd love for you to become engaged in this if you're not, and we look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.